The studio lights came up to their usual bright warmth as the audience applauded Gwyneth Paltrow walking onto the set of The View. She moved with calm assurance, dressed simply, projecting the kind of composure that suggested she was already braced for skepticism. She greeted each of the hosts with polite warmth, exchanging a brief hug with Whoopi Goldberg before settling into her chair. Joy Behar leaned back, arms loosely crossed, watching Gwyneth with an expression that hovered somewhere between curiosity and amusement. From the outside, it looked like any other high-profile guest appearance, the kind viewers had seen dozens of times before. The conversation opened gently. Gwyneth spoke about balance, about stepping back from constant productivity, about learning to listen to herself after years of running on momentum. Her voice was steady, careful, not evangelical. She framed her words as personal discoveries rather than universal truths, emphasizing that what worked for her might not work for everyone. The audience nodded along, some applauding lightly at familiar sentiments about burnout and self-awareness. Joy jumped in early with a joke, raising an eyebrow and quipping about how exhausting it sounded to be so intentional all the time. The crowd laughed. Gwyneth smiled easily, responding that intention didn't have to mean rigidity, that it could be playful. The exchange felt relaxed, even friendly, and for a moment it seemed like the segment would remain light, punctuated by humor and soft disagreement. As the discussion shifted toward Gwyneth's wellness brand and the influence it carried, Joy's tone sharpened slightly. She asked, half joking, half pointed, whether Gwyneth ever worried about people taking lifestyle suggestions too seriously. Gwyneth answered calmly, explaining that she encouraged curiosity, not blind adherence. She spoke about personal agency, about trusting people to make informed decisions. Her hands moved gently as she spoke, palms open, reinforcing the sense that she wasn't trying to convince so much as explain. Joy leaned forward. She said curiosity was one thing, but influence was another. She remarked that when someone with a massive platform talked about health, it didn't stay hypothetical. The laughter faded. Gwyneth nodded, acknowledging the point, and said responsibility mattered deeply to her. She explained that she believed transparency and choice were part of that responsibility, that conversations around wellness were evolving and imperfect. Joy interrupted, waving a hand dismissively, saying imperfection was a luxury not everyone could afford when it came to health. Her voice rose just enough to register frustration. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the turn. Gwyneth's expression tightened slightly, though her tone remained controlled. She said skepticism was healthy, but cynicism shut down dialogue. She added that women were often mocked for exploring alternatives, while similar curiosity in other spaces was framed as innovation. That comment landed sharply. Joy scoffed, her patience visibly thinning. She said this wasn't about mocking women, it was about holding people accountable for what they put into the world. She pointed out that not everyone had the resources to experiment safely. Her words came faster now, overlapping Gwyneth's attempt to respond. Gwyneth straightened in her chair. Her voice remained even, but firmer. She said accountability didn't require hostility, and disagreement didn't justify dismissal. She emphasized that she wasn't prescribing lifestyles, only sharing conversations she believed were worth having. She said reducing complex discussions to punchlines was part of why people stopped listening to each other. Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said she wasn't interested in being told how to ask questions on her own show. The tension became palpable, the kind that made the audience go silent without being prompted. Whoopi leaned in, trying to soften the moment, suggesting they take a breath and refocus. But Joy wasn't finished. She said intention didn't negate impact, her voice now openly irritated. She accused Gwyneth of hiding behind soft language while profiting from it. Gwyneth's calm finally wavered, not into anger, but into something more resolute. She said criticism was fair, but caricature wasn't. She said she'd come on the show expecting a conversation, not a cross-examination framed as ridicule. The room felt smaller, tighter. Cameras cut between faces. Sunny Hostin watching intently, Whoopi looking concerned, the audience frozen in anticipation. Joy shook her head, dismissive. She said if Gwyneth wanted a gentle conversation, daytime television wasn't the place for it. Her chair scraped loudly as she pushed it back, the sound echoing through the studio in a way that felt louder than it should have. Whoopi raised her hands instinctively, saying, "Joy, hold on," but Joy was already standing. She said she was done pretending this was a productive exchange. She said she refused to sit through what she called sanitized lectures about intention. Her voice carried frustration that felt cumulative, as though this moment had tapped into something far larger than the segment itself. Gwyneth remained seated, hands folded now, watching Joy with a mixture of surprise and disappointment. She didn't respond, didn't chase the moment. That restraint made the contrast sharper. The audience murmured as Joy stepped away from the table, her microphone still live as she repeated that she was finished. Producers' voices could be faintly heard off camera, urging a pause. When the cameras came back from commercial, the absence at the table was impossible to ignore. The chair Joy Behar had vacated sat slightly angled away from the table, as if frozen mid-motion, its emptiness drawing more attention than any person could have. The applause that greeted the return was hesitant, scattered, unsure of what emotion it was meant to express. Whoopi Goldberg took a breath before speaking, her presence steady but visibly weighted by the moment that had just unfolded. She addressed the audience directly, acknowledging that tensions sometimes flared on live television, especially when conversations touched on deeply held beliefs and responsibilities. Her tone was measured, not defensive, not apologetic, but grounding. She emphasized that The View had always been a place for disagreement, but also for staying present through it. The words landed carefully, as if she were trying to stitch the room back together without pretending it hadn't torn. Gwyneth Paltrow remained composed, but the calm now had edges. Her shoulders were squared, her hands clasped more tightly than before. When Whoopi invited her to respond, Gwyneth paused, clearly considering whether anything she said might further inflame the situation. She finally spoke, her voice quieter than earlier but firm. She said she respected skepticism and welcomed tough questions, but she believed the value of conversation was lost the moment people decided to leave rather than listen. She stressed that disagreement wasn't the problem, disengagement was. Sunny Hostin leaned in, asking whether moments like that made Gwyneth hesitant to engage publicly on controversial topics. Gwyneth considered the question carefully. She said hesitation was natural, but silence came with its own consequences. She explained that she continued to speak because conversations around health, agency, and responsibility weren't going away just because they were uncomfortable. She said she believed people could disagree sharply and still remain in dialogue, and that she'd hoped for that outcome. The audience applauded softly, more in acknowledgement than agreement. The mood wasn't celebratory, it was contemplative. Behind the scenes, the tension was still rippling. Producers moved quickly, adjusting cameras to avoid lingering too long on the empty chair. A stage manager whispered to Whoopi that Joy had left the studio for the day. There would be no return appearance, no closing remark to smooth things over. The decision was final, at least for the afternoon. On air, Whoopi acknowledged that Joy had chosen to step away, framing it as a response to frustration rather than a definitive exit from the show. Her wording was careful, clearly chosen to lower the temperature rather than spike it. She reminded viewers that strong opinions were part of the show's DNA, but so was the responsibility to manage how those opinions were expressed. Gwyneth nodded, her expression thoughtful. She said she understood frustration, and she understood how easily conversations about wellness and influence could become charged. She admitted that she herself had learned the hard way how words could be interpreted beyond intention. But she reiterated that leaving the table closed the door on mutual understanding. Her voice didn't carry judgment, just disappointment. Joy's absence became a presence in itself. Every pause seemed to echo a little louder. Joy had long been known for her sharp humor and refusal to soften her opinions, and her walk-off felt less like a single moment and more like a collision of styles, direct confrontation meeting deliberate calm, neither willing to bend in the moment. Whoopi steered the conversation toward a broader reflection on discourse. She spoke about how television amplified conflict, often rewarding escalation over nuance. She said moments like the one they'd just experienced challenged everyone involved, hosts, guests, viewers, to consider what they expected from public conversations. Did they want resolution, or just release? Sunny added that walking away could feel powerful in the moment, but it also left unanswered questions behind. She said the hardest conversations were often the ones that required staying put. The audience murmured in agreement. Gwyneth shared a brief anecdote about a time early in her career when she'd shut down in the face of criticism, choosing silence over engagement. She said it took years to realize that disengagement didn't protect her, it just delayed understanding. She acknowledged that not every conversation could be productive, but she believed most deserved an honest attempt. As the segment wound down, Whoopi thanked Gwyneth for remaining present despite the intensity of the exchange. Gwyneth returned the thanks, emphasizing that she respected the show's commitment to debate, even when it was uncomfortable. She didn't mention Joy by name again, but the omission felt deliberate rather than dismissive. The show transitioned to its next segment, but the energy never fully reset. Viewers at home took to social media almost immediately, clips of Joy's exit circulating with captions framing it as everything from principled refusal to overreaction.